Well, last week my dad finished off our family, All in the Family series with a message about church family and a message about unity. So if you weren't here, if you want to watch it again, it's on YouTube. Great message, great challenge about unity. And really, God's heart for the family is that it would be one, starting with marriage, starting with raising of children and rearing of children, and then when children leave, that was good timing, Jet. When children leave their father and mother, right? They are united into, one flesh. All of that oneness that God designed family, He designed for the church as well, that we would be one, many parts, but one body. So go back and listen to that and check that out. Great message. He's not here today, so we'll just talk him up, but he did a phenomenal job, and good word. We're going to be going into a new series this week, and we're calling it Anchored. And we're going to be here for a little bit, most of July, most likely, maybe a little bit of August. So it's our summer series. And here's the big idea behind Anchored. What anchors your soul? What is the thing that anchors your soul? We all know that life has storms. We all know that sometimes you're clipping along and everything's going great, and other times you're just nosediving and everything seems out of control. What anchors your soul? And so we're going to be looking at the book of Hebrews, and we're going to be preaching through, not necessarily every verse, but we're going to preach through the book of Hebrews, because the author of Hebrews had a purpose of why he wrote it. We don't know who the author was. Could be a she, but we're going with he. The author had a purpose, and the ultimate purpose was to help the Christians, Jewish Christians, anchor their faith in Jesus Christ. So what anchors our soul? Maybe it's money. A lot of people in the world, money anchors their soul. And if they got enough money, or if it makes sense, or if they're getting the right interest rate, or if they're getting a good return on investment, they're feeling good. Money. Problem with that is, once the money's gone, guess what? The anchor's gone. For some people, it's relationships. I identify with this relationship. It's me and this person, and we're together, and we're, in love and all this stuff. And that's great. But that relationship breaks apart. What happens to the anchor? Some people, it's political things. Right? You will know come November 6th. Is that the right date? Come June 31st. No. Whatever the 5th, whatever the election day is, you will know if that is an anchor for your soul or not. Misplaced, but you will know if it's an anchor based on your reaction to the results. Because if the guy you don't vote for wins and your whole world falls apart, maybe you had an anchor there and you shouldn't have. Because I got news for you. Both sides say democracy is going to be destroyed if the other guy wins. I don't know if you guys can see that talking point or not. The end of the world is going to happen if the other guy wins from both sides. And you will know if it's an anchor for your soul if the guy you voted for wins and you're all of a sudden like, everything's good and everything's going to be fine. No, it's not. Okay? We know how this story ends. It's not. And we're going to be getting into some of this here in Hebrews. Politics can be an anchor for your soul, but it's misplaced because you remove the security of that, and guess what happens? You're crushed. You're destroyed. And so as we look at this series, and we look at the idea of where should our anchor go, it just so happens it's the very idea that the author of Hebrews wants to communicate to his audience. Hebrews was written roughly around AD 63, 68. We know this because of some of the events that we can kind of see inside of Hebrews, but we don't know who wrote the book of Hebrews. They didn't announce themselves. Some people say it was Paul. I disagree. Paul announced himself very clearly in all the things he wrote, right? I, Paul, suffering for Jesus on a mountain in Maui. No, right? Paul, it's very clear when Paul is talking. In fact, even when he was in prison in one of the epistles, I can't remember which one it is, but he actually says, I am writing this part by my own hand right now, right? Paul's so clear that I am the one talking. We don't see that in Hebrews. Other theories are it could have been Barnabas, could have been Apollos. We know Apollos was a dynamic teacher in the new church, in the early church. In fact, Paul even talks about some of you say I follow Apollos, and some of you say I follow Paul, but we follow Christ, right? Apollos was a dynamic figure. It could have been him. Could also been Priscilla. Or it could have been Luke. Those are the primary people that could have written the book of Hebrews. But at the end of the day, we don't know who wrote it. And we have to assume that if God wanted us to know, and if it mattered who wrote it, we'd probably know. And so throughout this series, we're talking about the author. Whoever that mysterious figure is, the author of Hebrews is writing to a specific audience. This audience that he is writing to is Jewish Christians. Specifically, that's why it's called the book of Hebrews. Jewish Christians. And he is writing to converts that have converted from Judaism over to Christianity. And there is something that is happening in their life, in their story, that is prompting the author to write this letter, to write this book, if you will, to them. And so he's writing to them. And here's the fundamental foundational verse that we're going to be looking at. It comes from Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19. He says this, we have this hope as an anchor for our souls, firm and secure. When I ask you, where does your hope come from? What anchors your hope? If you give any answer other than what the author of Hebrews wants to reveal to us, your anchor will not be firm and secure. Politics changes. Money changes. Relationships change. Health changes. Maybe you found your anchor in beauty, in being handsome. I once found my anchor in having hair. And then I tell you what, it disappears and you got to deal with that. My kids will be like, why don't you grow your hair out? I'll tell you why. Looks like there's a bird that hatched a nest on my face when it grows out. Wherever your anchor is, if it is not where the author is going to be telling us in this book to place it, it will not be firm and secure. And so you will be tossed to and fro. With every whim, with every crazy cultural thing, with all of the, prevailing wisdom of the new age, you will be tossed there, tossed here. You will not be firm and secure. And so he's writing to Jewish Christians. Jewish Christians are experiencing something at this time that is causing them to doubt. You can imagine, there's really two fronts that were creating this. One was interpersonal doubt, and the other was this thing called persecution. And so Jewish Christians, many of them were beginning to question, what did I sign up for? On the interpersonal side, you can imagine what it would have been like. You grew up your entire life, you practice Judaism, right? You practice the Torah, there's the sacrificial system, there's priests, synagogues, temples, the entire thing, Passover, sacraments, all of it. And this is what you're supposed to do to get to God. This is what you're supposed to do to have relationship with God. This is what you've been taught your entire life. And then this guy shows up. He does miracles. He's an amazing teacher. He proclaims himself as the Son of God. And you have to wrestle with, okay, hold on. I believe there is one God, and he has proclaimed himself in Deuteronomy, I am the Lord your God. There is no other God before me. And now there's this guy on the earth who's like, I'm also God. And you're like, that doesn't fit with my theology. And you have to wrestle with this, and you have to now imagine you're one of those and you've converted to Christ. And you see him for who he is, and you see that he fulfilled the law, and you see that he rose again, and you've placed your faith. But there's this fallout that happens. There's a fallout with family. There's a fallout with friendships. There's a fallout with the way that you used to do life. You don't have to do it that way any longer. There's a fallout with, I was certain I was never supposed to eat pig, and now I guess I can have bacon. And I'm eating bacon, and it's so good, but I feel guilty. There's this tension that these guys lived with. I mean, you say, I don't like change. I don't think any of you had to deal with this kind of change. Right? We go to church, we do the thing, and then all of a sudden God reveals himself new, and he fulfills what we thought we were supposed to do, and there's this wrestling of how does that work now? And Jesus even predicted it. Hold on a second. My little pad here needs to not go to sleep on me, because otherwise I don't know what I'm saying. Jesus predicted this. He says in Luke chapter 12, verse 49 through 53, I have come to set the world on fire, and I wish it were already burning. Stitch that verse on a pillow, right? Put that one over your kitchen sink. I have a terrible baptism of suffering ahead of me, and I am under a heavy burden until it is accomplished. Do you think I have come to bring peace to earth? No. This should shake your theology a little bit. Because God's idea of peace on earth is not our idea of peace on earth. Our idea of peace on earth is carols and Christmas and snowflakes and everything's happy and there's this tra-la-la-la-la-la-la. God's idea of peace on earth is peace between mankind and him. Not necessarily between mankind and one another. There's a difference. And so he says, no, I have come to divide people against each other. From now on, families will be split apart. 3 in favor of me, 2 against, or 2 in favor and 3 against. The father will be divided against the son, and the son against the father. Mother against daughter, and daughter against mother. Mother-in-law against everybody. I'm just kidding. Doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. I just thought I'd... Mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. And what's the division? What's the reason there's division? Because some will see Christ as Lord and Savior, and others will not. And those two things don't mix. And so father will be divided from son on the basis of their confession of who Christ is. And mother will be divided from daughter on the basis of who their confession in Christ is. Now that's a real good verse to follow up All in the Family series, right? But true that who Christ is a dividing point. Your confession of Christ separates you from those who would not confess Christ. And so for Jewish Christians living in the or in the early church, guess what they wrestled with? Mother divided from son and daughter and this tension that they lived with, this interpersonal doubt that would creep in. And so that was one of the things that they would wrestle with. Man, I didn't sign up for that. I believe in Jesus and I liked his teaching, but I didn't sign up for my dad not wanting to talk to me now. I didn't sign up for this awkwardness in the family. Thanksgiving used to be fun, and now they treat me different. You will always be treated different just because you profess Christ. Because it's a dividing point. And they didn't sign up for that. And so that was one of the things causing them to doubt. The other thing is this thing called persecution. They were persecuted. And we believe the book, Hebrews, is written around AD 63 to 68. Well, in AD 64, Rome burned. And do you know who Nero, Emperor Nero, blamed for burning Rome? Christians. We actually even see in Acts chapter 18, there's two characters, Priscilla and Aquila, and it says this, there he, who is Paul, became acquainted with a Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently arrived from Italy with his wife Priscilla. They had left Italy when Claudius Caesar deported all Jews from Rome. I mean, we're talking about real persecution. The kind where a government says, no, get out of here. The kind where a government makes it illegal to practice Christianity. That's what Nero did. We're talking about beheadings. We're talking about floggings. We're talking about if you practice Christianity and if you practice the faith, you were ostracized, you were outcast, you were removed from social life. Not to mention that the Christian life by itself, forget the persecution, but the Christian life by itself doesn't mesh well with paganism. Right? Pagan feasts and festivals and the debauchery and immorality and all the crazy that pagan, you can notice most pagan religions are fine with one another. That's what you do. Cool, that's what I do. You put a Christian in there, guess what? Division. Because Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. And so Christianity doesn't mesh with any of the other ones. The way you're called to live, the way you're called to act, you can't partake in the things of the world and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't mesh. And so you got Jewish Christians and they're asking themselves, what in the world? I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I thought I was getting involved in. And this is why it's so important. I really believe this. We should be bringing the gospel and preaching the gospel and communicating the gospel to those around us. Not communicating, hey, come to my church. It's a really cool social group. Because when people join Christianity or come to an understanding thinking that all of a sudden everything's better, all of a sudden everything's perfect, as soon as the division takes place, they throw their hands up and go, that's not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up for this. Jesus said in Matthew 10:16, behold, I am sending you out as a sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Beware of men, for they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in the synagogues. And you will be dragged before governors and kings for my sake, to bear witness before them and the Gentiles. And when they deliver you over, do not be anxious how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child, and the children will rise against parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. Jesus predicted this. And so the author of Hebrews, this is the climate he's writing this book in. And we're going to start in chapter 1. It's a good place to start. We're going to look at 4 verses real quick. And I want us to see the message that he tells these people right off the bat. See, if I was writing a letter, or if in today's age we were writing a letter of encouragement, right? Imagine we had a friend who's going through this same stuff. Yeah, our culture's so full of feelings, right? We're so in tune and we care about the feelings and the emotions and the experiences. And like if I was writing this letter, I'll just be honest, most likely it would sound something like, Dear Johnny, I heard about the persecution. I heard your house was set on fire and that your dad has disowned you. And I'm writing to let you know I'm thinking of you. I'm sorry for what you're going through. Praying for you. Don't get caught. Hugs, right? Be like, just, hang in there, buddy. Keep your chin up. I know you can do it. I know you can make it. We're going to look at what the author of Hebrews writes. And it has nothing to do with the feelings of these people being persecuted and ostracized from their family. Check this out. Hebrews 1, verse 1 and 2. Long ago, this is where he starts. Long ago, in a land far away, doesn't say that. Long ago, God spoke many times and in many ways to our ancestors through the prophets. And now in these final days, he has spoken to us through his Son. I'm going to pause there. Long ago, God spoke through the prophets. You can imagine the tension that these guys feel. Did I make a mistake leaving Judaism and going to Christianity? Did I, am I being deceived? And the first thing he does right off the bat is he affirms the faith that they had, that they practiced, saying, long ago, God spoke through the prophets. We're talking Moses. We're talking, now I forget all the names that fast. And so he validates right from the beginning, you believed God spoke through the prophets. I affirm that. But then he says, and now, in these final days, he has spoken to us through his Son. And so he's drawing a quick connection between Judaism and what you believed and how you practiced and what is happening now. He's drawing a connection. God spoke all of this. Everything was right. The Torah, the law, the 10 Commandments, everything. God spoke it long ago. It's how he revealed himself. He spoke through the prophets. He spoke through visions. He spoke through dreams, right? He validates it, and then he draws a connection and he says, and now he is revealing himself through his Son. Now remember who he's talking to. Persecuted, on the run, beat down, broken, probably very emotional Jewish Christians. And he immediately draws a connection. He spoke through the prophets, now he's speaking through the Son. And then he dives into who is the Son. I find it fascinating that the first thing out of his mouth to people who are suffering and confused and broken down is to start saying, let me tell you about Jesus. Look at this. God promised everything to the Son as an inheritance. And through the Son, he created the universe. The Son radiates God's own glory and expresses the very character of God, and he sustains everything by the mighty power of his command. And when he had cleansed us from our sins, he sat down in the place of honor at the right hand of the majestic God in heaven. And verse 4. This shows that the Son is far greater than the angels, just as the name God gave him is greater than their names. Here's what the author of Hebrews knows. If there's anything I can say to you that will encourage you, if there's anything I can say that will give you hope and give you a future and give you something that is firm and secure, if there's anything I can do to take your anchor and put it into something firm, it will be that I will tell you about the Son. Look at the Son. God spoke to the prophets, yes, but he's now doing this. He spoke through Jesus, and look at who he is. That beautiful song says, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth, persecution, broken relationships, the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And so what does he tell us about the Son? What does he want these Christians who are struggling with doubt, what does he want them to know? First of all, that everything is the Son's as an inheritance. Meaning everything is for him. All authority is his. All of this is his inheritance. That one day he will judge the living and the dead. That one day kings and kingdoms will bow down. That one day every knee will bow. That the authority of this world is his. How big is your problem when you look at the fact that all of this is the Son's? You and we are not the center of this story. This story is not about you and I. It's about him. And he wants them to know everything is his inheritance. He wants them to know that through the Son, God created the universe. He created it all. He's omnipotent. And if he can create it all, can he not sustain it all? That the Son would radiate God's own glory, and that the Son expresses the very character of God. It has been said that Jesus is perfect theology. If you want to study God, study Christ. How God revealed himself through Jesus. Colossians 2:9, for in Christ lives all the fullness of God in a human body. His character, his nature, and God's glory radiates from the Son. He wants them to know that and be reminded that he cleansed them of their sin. I know you're going through hard times. I know it's tough. You're being killed and you're being chased and you're being kicked out of the places you live and you can't go to synagogues. You're going through all these things, but can I remind you that he cleansed you of your sin? And that ultimately, none of that stuff is going to separate you from him. He wants them to know that Jesus, the Son, is seated in the place of honor at the right hand of God. And that his name is greater and far above all other names. What's he do? He takes an audience that is going through hard things, brutal things, and he takes their focus off of the brutality of their situation and he puts it on the Son. Whatever you're going through, the confusion, the doubt, the hardship, the unknowns, the fears, whatever you're going through, let's take a note from the author of Hebrews and let's just stick our eyes up on the Son. Paul Washer is a preacher, powerful preacher, and I saw recently a video. He told a story. He said, I was preaching and a man shouted out, "How can one man dying on a cross forgive all the sins of mankind?" And Paul Washer said, "That's a great question. I'm going to answer your question. Now sit down." And he answered it something like this. He said, if you take all of the kingdoms and the kings and the thrones and the powers and the authorities and all of the mountains and the seas and the rocks and the trees and every living thing that's ever breathed, and if you take all of a man's emotion and all of his longing and all of his passions and all of his dreams and aspirations, if you take all of those things and put them on one side of the scale, and then he said, if you take Jesus Christ and you place him on this side of the scale, he will outweigh them all. He will outweigh them all. And that is what the author of Hebrews wants us to start with in this series. That the anchor you hold, if you place it in the firm foundation of the radiating Son of God, who holds all things together and who is all things and who inherits all things and whose name is above all things, if you place it there, you will have a firm foundation. And so then he says in Hebrews 6:19, for we have this hope. And we're going to unpack that as an anchor for our souls. Firm and secure. Worship team, you can come forward. Wherever you are this morning, emotionally, physically, there is a God, there is a Son who is above them all. If you need prayer for anything, we'd love to pray with you. Let's stand and let's sing this last song. And let's worship that name who is above all other names.